Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started today, I want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by the online course, Creating a Meaningful Life. Now, this course is the culmination of 20 years of work and research by my personal mentor and university professor, Linda Levine, and myself. Now, in it, we teach not only the skills and strategies that we've used and taught and which are being used by life coaches all over the world to create a life of fulfillment and balance, but we also go into how you can design your lifestyle, how you can improve in every aspect, all 8 of the aspects that make a complete and rich life. And really, we share a lot of our wisdom. So if you've been inspired by the show, by some of the guests on here who seem to have these incredibly rich, fulfilling lives, I do encourage you to check it out. And of course, it is backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. So to take advantage of a special coupon for listeners of this podcast, visit jle.vi/meaning. All right, here we go with the show. This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You guys, one of the only things that every nutritional expert that we've had on the show seems to actually agree on is that we all need to eat more vegetables, eat more greens, eat organic, cut out all the processed junk. Well, who has the time, right? Who has the time to go out, do the shopping, make the salads, make the juices, make the smoothies? And that's what I love so much about Organifi. Their product is an all-organic green juice. It has all of the nutrients that you need. It tastes absolutely amazing, and it's made by wonderful people who I consider to be personal friends. And as listeners of this show, you guys can actually save 20% on your first order. And all you have to do is go to Organifi.com. That's ORGANIFI.com and use the coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode. You guys, today I have a guest for you that I totally hit it off with. Her name is Amy E. Smith, and she is a life coach who specializes in helping you have the hard conversations. She helps you say no without looking like a total jerk, and she coaches people and speaks all over the world, all over the country, through her brand, the Joy Junkie. And she uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, speaker to help individuals really empower themselves, get to a point of self-love and confidence where they can communicate authentically, openly, honestly. Now, you might ask, what's superhuman about that? And honestly, I think it is one of the skills that has helped me really grow as an individual. And just the morning of recording this podcast, I was having this exact debate with someone very close in my life saying, I think you need to say no more. I think it'll free you up. I think it'll help you be easier. I think it'll help you control your time more and just do more of what you want and get you out of uncomfortable situations. So we recorded an episode on it, and I was very lucky that Amy happened to be on the docket for this week's episode. We talk about a lot of very, very interesting stuff, from emotions, responsibility, emotional maturity, communication styles, inner dialogue. It sounds all really touchy-feely, but actually it was an incredible episode, and I think you'll definitely see that we hit it off. So without any further ado, let me introduce you guys to my new super friend, Amy E. Smith. Miss Amy Smith, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. And I have to tell you that probably over the last few hours, I think I've become mildly obsessed with you.
That's amazing. Why? Thank you. I'm flattered and honored.
Oh, well, I currently have all your courses from Udemy in my shopping cart right now.
Amazing.
And
thank you.
So anytime I'm on a podcast, I don't want to be an so I want to really know about somebody's work and be familiar with it, and started listening to a couple of your podcast episodes and your TEDx talk. And I could not agree with you more about the detrimental nature of how we teach people how to learn. And I'm completely that person going, teach me. Oh my God, teach me. I have so much that I want to memorize and know and retain. So you might have a stalker on your hands.
Well, I mean, that's fantastic because I had the exact same impression when we heard from your team and they're like, you've got to email Amy. And I checked out your site and I was like, wow, totally vibed with all your content. You totally kind of like, in Hebrew, we say you totally bought me, but I guess that doesn't translate very well. Tell us a little bit about you for the audience who hasn't checked out your site, which by the way is gorgeous. I really enjoyed snooping around it.
Thank you. I designed that on myself and did it myself. So I'm hugely honored by that. You can see that in the footnote at the bottom. It says, Amazing. Still my and karma will eat you alive. Anyway, a little bit about me. So basically what I do kind of in my little corner of the interwebs is I essentially teach people how to stand up for themselves without being. And we have this sort of misunderstanding that if we truly give voice to our wants, opinions, needs, and stances, that if that is in opposition to anybody else, that must mean that we are purposely inflicting pain on them or we're just being a dick. And it really doesn't have to be that way. So what that really looks like in my work is the internal component of actually believing that your voice is valid in order to have the confidence, all of the personal development elements of your belief systems, how you speak to yourself, dealing with fear, etc. And then the actual practical verbiage that you need to, for instance, tell your mother-in-law to back off or to tell your wife or your spouse what you really want in the bedroom without coming across like an ass. Those sorts of conversations we typically avoid like the plague. And so there's that internal piece and that external piece. And that's essentially what I do.
I like that. I like that a lot because I recently had this exact discussion with someone very near and dear in my own life where they were like, I think you were too hard on them. And I was like, I think you're being too soft on them. I think sometimes you have to tell people exactly where the dog died and say no. And it was a pretty uncomfortable situation where I had to kind of point blank look someone in the face and be like, no, I really wouldn't like to grab coffee. I'm sorry. Which is a super hard thing to do. So I want to hear why that's so important. And I guess that the question I'm really asking here is like, what's the superhuman angle here? And I have all my kinds of thoughts on it and everything, but I want to hear why for you this is such an important thing. I mean, you've devoted a lot of time to this. You've set your career in this direction. Why help people communicate and specifically communicate on the hard stuff?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And I think what we don't realize with a lot of our interpersonal behavior is what sort of subconscious message we are telling ourselves and kind of ingraining in our neural pathways when we choose to stay silent. So for instance, let's say you're at work and somebody says something really offensive or it doesn't line up with your political beliefs or your religious beliefs. And instead of rocking the boat, in quotes, we think, oh, it's easier to be quiet. It's easier to just maybe make a snide little noise like or something like that. But let's just not be uncomfortable. Let's not feel an emotion that might make us challenged in some way, right? We're always avoiding pain, right? Major human driver, we're either pursuit of pleasure, avoidance of pain. If we see something like that we think is going to be painful, it's going to be painful to have this altercation with somebody. Okay, let's just abort mission. Let's not go there. But what happens when you do that habitually over and over again, you start telling yourself that everybody else's wants, opinions, desires, and needs or stances are more important than yours. That's the subconscious message, which has a massive influence in your self-confidence. And then that has a ripple effect that influences how you run your financial house, how many risks you take in your work, what you choose to push yourself at the gym. I mean, it has major implications. And it all stems from what we are perpetuating day in and day out by avoiding something that we think is going to be so incredibly uncomfortable that we just can't possibly bear it.
I like that. That actually took a totally different direction than I thought it was going to. I mean, my whole thing comes from really actually Steve Jobs, who said you should be as proud of the things you don't do as the things you do. And the whole idea that you can only do so much, you only have so many hours in the day, you only can keep in touch with so many people, you can only do so much work. And so like, you need to be as selective and assertive about like, no, I'm not going to, do this piece of busy work, or I'm not going to spend 3 hours in line doing this, so that you can do more. But I like that kind of level above, where we get into kind of the psychological aspect of like, what messaging are you giving to yourself if you're consistently compromising in that way? I really like that. Tell me, Amy, a little bit about Joy Junkie. Like, what does that mean? I really like that.
Well, part of it was a business strategy, because I figured, if my niche changes, if I become, I don't know, a mechanic, I could still have Joy Junkie mechanics. So from like a copy or a trademark standpoint, I thought it made sense. But I also felt, on a deeper level, that we are inundated with addictions in our society, even if it's something that we think is seemingly harmless, like binging out on Netflix or perusing Facebook nonstop, all the way to, severe chemical dependencies. That is, something that completely takes over our entire life. And I thought, what if people were actually addicted to something that created massive joy and fulfillment in their world? And it's a switch of focus, right? It's the glass half full, half empty. Do we want to stay acutely focused on the shit we don't want in our life? Like, what if she doesn't like me? What if I'm not a good lover? What if I don't get this promotion? What if I don't land this client? Or do we want to stay focused on the things that actually make us feel good? Again, pursuing those things that give us pleasure. So I thought, what if we really shifted that and we looked at getting loaded essentially on positivity and created more of an addiction or obsession with what we do want in our life instead of catastrophe and the things we want to avoid?
Wow. I think your website is right. I think we're going to be besties.
Yay!
I'm just looking at your site. I'm like, God, you write some really killer copy here. Just like,
thank you.
It's kind of about me, but it's mostly about you. Oh, love, I see you. Like, phenomenal. Just fantastic. So let me ask you this. I want to try and get actionable for folks, because I think this is one of those things. We recently did an episode on quitting drinking alcohol as a health experiment. And, one thing that the guest said that I thought was so interesting, he's like, you'd think it would be so easy, just don't drink, right? And the same is true of confidence, at least in my experience. It's like, well, just don't feel insecure, or just don't beat yourself up. But it's not that way. I mean, folks like you and I wouldn't have a job if it was so easy to just do it, right? And so I'd like to know a little bit about the steps. Like, how can someone first, I guess, break the pattern and then build new patterns? And what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I know you have a history of ADD and I have a very strong history of anxiety. And that whole idea of like, just calm down or just focus. It's like, don't you think if I could just focus, I would? Like, and it's so frustrating. But what it is essentially is we're just changing habit. That's it. It's not really much different than deciding that you're going to get physically fit, and then really setting up the container that fosters that. So for instance, if somebody wanted to quit drinking, one of your items of business would be, don't go to a bar, right? Don't stock up a bunch of alcohol in your house thinking you can be a hero somehow and muscle through. We need to set ourselves up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you.
And I think we think that we need to be some sort of magician and it needs to be really extremely hard. I don't think it always has to be. I think a lot of it is breaking through social stigmas and a lot of family of origin stuff. And I think much of it has to do with what you were taught about emotions. So what I mean by that is when you, for instance, choose not to, let's say, like the example you gave about saying, no, I don't want to go get coffee. What's usually happening for most people in that moment when somebody poses you an invite or a request in which you really don't want to say yes to, in that instant, we typically feel an emotional response. And I think it's a fallacy, but we experience this emotion of guilt. We think I must be responsible for them not feeling. I need to make sure that they feel okay with my response, which is ultimately not our choice. In that moment, if you can acknowledge, like, okay, what I'm actually feeling is not guilt because I have done nothing wrong. I am not ill-intended. I'm not malicious. I just would like to do something different with my time. Mm-hmm. But what we do is we react to that guilt and we go, oh my God, this is painful. I don't want to feel this. Make it stop. Okay, let me just acquiesce and say yes to what I don't want to do.
Totally.
Right? I mean, even if you're somebody who takes clients, for example, and somebody says, you can't fit me in. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And what is that? That's uncomfortable. Oh my God, I must be responsible for them. Let me make this stop instead of being with that emotion, dissecting it a little bit, and then going, wait a minute, I'm not at fault. And I can converse with this person with grace and kindness. I don't have to be you can be assertive and quite kind at the same time. I think there is a huge piece of understanding what we've been taught about our emotions. So a lot of times growing up, you're told, like, don't hurt anybody's feelings. If you are going to cry, go cry in your room. We're not taught to feel through things at all. And this very much has an effect when we're trying to stand up for ourselves because it's uncomfortable. We're taught like that's our responsibility to make everybody happy, which is not true. So I would say first item of business is to look at where do you silence yourself? And I'm not talking about silencing yourself when you just genuinely don't want to open up a can of worms, right? Like having a political debate with somebody, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when your silence makes you a liar.
Yes, I love that.
Right? Yeah. Like when your silence feigns compliance with somebody. That's when I think you need to give voice to something. So you don't even have to get into, let's say, a huge political debate. But I'll give you an example. I do community theater sometimes in my spare time. And one of the kids who I was acting with showed me a picture of something that was extremely disparaging to the mentally disabled community and was kind of joking about it, kind of like, hey, Amy, don't you think this is funny? And I said, so in that moment, I have that option. Like he could maybe think he could stop liking me, right? Fear of not belonging, very primitive, fear of not belonging. Not being accepted. Or I could say something that makes me not a liar. And so I did. I said, hey, you do you, man. I actually find that offensive. Please don't show me that. And I walked away. So it's not necessarily like, let's get into a huge debate, but it's just knowing what Amy believes, what I find valuable is just as important as this guy. And I'm not willing to allow my silence to make me a liar. So you have to figure out, where are those instances? Sometimes it's a category, like I have a really hard time speaking up in my work, or I really have a hard time speaking up anytime somebody requests something of me, or anything related to my wife or girlfriend or husband or whoever. You have to identify what are those huge triggers. When do you tend to cave to the guilt or avoidance of conflict or whatever? That's the first step. Mm-hmm. But then what you can really do is decide what you want to say to somebody, what you actually want to speak up for. And it could be doing what I call declaring a do-over. So maybe looking at ways in your past where you haven't spoken up for things and saying, those are the areas where I want to start. And so you kind of craft, I would break a piece of paper up into 3 columns and start in the left-hand column and write, here's what I want to say. Here's what I want to give voice to, even if it's declining coffee with somebody or whatever it might be. The second column, forecast all the possible responses somebody might have. as many as you can think of, being indifferent, being extremely accepting, repelling you and making you wrong, everything that you can think about. And then in the third column, plan for your retort based off of any of those scenarios. We tend to get very deer in the headlights if we experience something that we weren't expecting, and then we go into fight or flight, right? We either become extremely combative or we tend to people please and acquiesce and hide out, both of which don't help foster human connection at all. If you can forecast that and feel a little bit more ahead of the game and equipped with tools in what you want to actually say, then you enter into these conversations with far more confidence.
I like that. I really like that. That's fantastic. Okay, so more prepared than I typically am, because my whole motto is, my core value number one is live life openly and honestly, be an open book. But I like this aspect of adding preparation into it so that you're not being reactive, and then in doing so, kind of say something that you don't actually mean, or be forced into a corner where it still comes out not the exact right message, even if you tried.
That's right. And I think it's different. Like, for instance, you might be, I don't think it's necessarily you. You sound very adept at this, but could be somebody out there listening who is extremely skilled in being forthright in their business. But when it comes to their personal life, it's extremely challenging. That's why it's important to look at, where do you silence yourself out of fear, right? Because of, could I get rejected, or will I be alone, or what if I fail? What if I succeed? All rooted in fear, which is a motivator, right? It doesn't feel good.
Definitely.
It's effective, but it doesn't feel good.
Definitely. So this might be a situation where you have to tell me an uncomfortable no, but can you think of any story, and of course anonymize it, of a time when this really impacted someone's life that you've worked with, or someone who's read your work, and just an example to articulate, I guess, the power of this communication style? Because I think people don't get just how much and how far this can go in kind of like freeing you in your interactions with others. And I get it. I completely get it. And I live it pretty much every day, at least since I discovered Burning Man culture. So I'd love to hear a story if you have one.
Sure. Man, this is something that is, God, there's so many, and I have tons in my own world. But I would also say that perhaps one of the best ways to figure out your trigger and what that entry point might be, it's the shit you complain about that you've done nothing about. So, for instance, if you're bitching like crazy about your partner or your boss or something like that, and what you have said would be a total surprise to that person, or the impact that it's had on you would be such a surprise to that person, that's on you. So look at the stuff that you kind of habitually complain about. I had a client who was severely unhappy in her work, and she knew that she really needed to take a step back from that company. And she kind of was doing a couple of different things, and she really figured out, like, I need to alleviate the time and space. It's become clutter in my world and impairing me from going after some of these other goals that I have. However, she was really terrified to tell her immediate supervisor in that project that she was going to be kind of on permanent hiatus and that she needed that respect. The emotional response from her was incredible, like very physiological, heart palpitations, extreme sweating, freaking out about having this conversation. So our work was, yeah, you're human, dude. That's just your fight or flight. Feel into it. Let yourself feel that. That will always dissipate if you actually feel it. It's part of our human resilience. But we try to abort mission and run all around emotion. So I'm like, just feel it. You're allowed to be scared. And then talk to your body. You're not actually in impending danger. You're not about to die. You can do this. And we did a whole bunch of preparation, what exactly she wanted to say. She delivered it and has since created so much more freedom in her world, was proud of herself. So we do this whole thing about being responsible for your intention, not your reception. So we went through all these possible ways in which she could be received. This person might think it's amazing and applaud her ingenuity and where she wants to go in her career. This person might make her wrong and try to inflict guilt. She might be indifferent and not really give a. So we kind of prepared for all of these various responses and looked at, how did you need to conduct yourself in order to be proud of what you've delivered, your intention, keeping your side of the road clean, no matter how you are received. That doesn't mean that that's not painful. Like, for instance, I've told, my mother many times that I don't believe in the religion I was raised in. That's devastating for her. And then she will, kind of throw guilt towards me. Like, how could you do this to me? Blah, blah, blah. There's an emotional feeling around that. That doesn't feel amazing. However, it's not my responsibility to make her happy. So the barometer is different. Instead of how everybody else receives me being the barometer of success, it's, am I proud of how I've conducted myself? And that's the new barometer of success. And this particular client went on to do that with an ex who was being a bit overbearing. And she finally said, hey, listen, I need you to understand what my intention is. And she was very articulate, very assertive, and kind. So we can kind of have this hybrid. We don't have to be super stoic and rigid.
That's really great. And one thing you said, particularly as I was kind of drawing the parallel in my own mind, you pointed out, which is you said you're not responsible for her happiness. And one of my 30 secrets of adulthood, I did a post on this kind of every year. I figure out what life's trying to tell me and try and crystallize it, is that every person is responsible for their own emotions. And this idea that you choose how to behave, but other people choose how to perceive your behavior and vice versa. And that doesn't mean go around in the world being a dick, as you said, but it does mean not beating yourself up for the way that people react to you doing you, so to speak.
That's right. And I think this can be really summed up by acknowledging that all things are simply energy, right? Like, we know if you talk to yourself constantly over and over again, you're highly likely to develop disease, chronic pain, whatever it happens to be. It's just energy. It will transfer. So for instance, if you're driving and somebody like honks at you and is angry at you, you feel that there's an actual energetic exchange that's coming at you. There's negative energy being propelled towards you. So of course you feel it. However, it is your decision if you adopt that as yours and take it on as truth. That's what we do far too often. So I'm not saying at all that if somebody doesn't like you standing up for yourself, that there's not going to be a subsequent emotion that has a negative energy. Like that you might very well feel it. However, you're not responsible for it.
Right.
You can choose to let go of it. That's foreign to us. We're not taught that.
It's interesting because whenever I talk about this concept with people, so in other languages, you have kind of a differentiation between responsible and responsible. There's responsible meaning it's up to you, as in it is your responsibility. And there's responsible as in it's on you, as in, it's your fault. It's not your fault, but it's as a cause of your behavior. And there's nuance there. There's a difference there. Mm-hmm. I think in this case, in this use, everyone's responsible for their own emotions. It's true in both ways. It's like whether or not you controlled it, you are angry right now because you allowed yourself to become angry. You allowed yourself to scream and punch the steering wheel, and you allowed that bad energy to come in. And so, that's on you, but also it's your responsibility to change it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And how the hell would we know to do that? We are taught from such an early age that that's not even a thing. I mean, when I talk about that, I get so much kickback about like, you made me feel this way, or he makes me feel this way. I'm like, no. You allow it. I think that's a fine line between recognizing your impact, because what we are doing is we are presenting information to a lot of people who don't have emotional intelligence, right? They aren't capable of seeing that they have ownership over their emotions. So it's far easier to make you wrong Look at what you did to me. How could you say that to me? You know how I feel about things. It's a very, very different concept for us to wrap our heads around. But I also think it's important to recognize your impact. Again, if you honk and you're aggressive towards people, especially people who aren't, where you yell and scream at your family, they might not have the capacity to wade through that negative emotion. And that's truly what I try teaching my clients and students, is to be with things that are uncomfortable and choose not to take it on. In fact, Madonna, ironically enough, has the most amazing quote that says, "Power is being told you are not loved and not being destroyed by it." And I love that, because I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's okay if somebody doesn't love you. It might hurt. There might be pain associated with it, but we have the ability to navigate that so it doesn't take us out or influence every relationship in the future.
I like that. That's a really, really good one. Madonna of all places.
I know.
Really, really good. So we've covered a lot. I want to ask if there are some other kind of superhuman skills or habits or routines that you feel make you perform at a higher level. And also in there, if you could mention whether or not meditation is part of your regimen. It sounds like it might be.
It is. Yeah, I definitely meditate on things for sure. And I do some, guided meditations and things like that. But I have such a hyper awareness around my internal conversation. And I meditate on that frequently. And it really is a habit, creating a new habit. So everything that happens in our mind is presented as truth. So if you have created the belief that you're not good enough or not smart enough or young enough, sexy enough, whatever, that will remain true to you until you dismantle it and create a new truth. What you focus on, as we hear all the time, becomes your reality. You have to be hyper vigilant about what is happening in your own mind in order to create what you really want. That is something that I do tend to engage with all the time. Noticing both how I feel about things as kind of a gateway to what's going on in my mind, and then also the ticker tape or the crystal clear verbiage that's happening in my mind, and catching it and rewiring it all the time, constantly, until it becomes a new norm, right? So that's a huge piece. I'm also really quite intense about how much sleep I get. I think that's very important.
Yes.
We see it almost like I don't know if you come across this much, but people in the past, I think it might be changing a little bit, wear their lack of sleep as a badge of honor. Look how amazing I am. And I'm like, oh, not exactly. And the older I've gotten, the less I can really tolerate that. So a couple of habits in that regard, but then also being really, really attuned to who I'm surrounded by, my human connection, what I choose to tolerate in my friendships and interpersonal relationships. I have very, very few relationships in my world that are one of obligation. I like to call them your charity accounts. And it's the ones that you are willing to give and show up in, although you get nothing in return. But the same is true for charity in your financial house. You don't give everything in your world to charity, right? You couldn't survive. You give a tiny piece to doing better in this world. Same is true for your relationships. The majority of them should be reciprocal. And then maybe one or two you give to charity.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was arguing this point this morning for like an hour and a half with someone.
Really?
Not arguing, debating this point. Because I'm a very, very firm believer, and some people can take it as, well, that's so self-serving and selfish that you only want to be around people who inspire you or make you better. But it's actually not that. It's really about being super selective, because everyone you spend time with has an influence on you. And I think you have to be extremely protective of that influence. I once had a life coach tell me after listening to me for about an hour, he goes, you must be really, really, really selective about the people you let into your life at any serious level, right? And I go, yep. He goes, you ever wonder why? I'm like, well, because of this and that and this theoretical idea. He goes, no. It's because it took you 15 years to design and construct the exact person that you want to be. And you feel like you're finally there. I do feel like I'm finally there, knock on wood. But you are extremely, extremely anxious about letting other people come in and change your work of art. And I think that's very true. I think it's true even if we're still on the way. I think we need to be very, very careful because your life and yourself is a canvas that you create. And, you know, it's wonderful to have people come in and collaborate. There's nothing like a solid duet, you know, but I think you need to qualify people before you hand them a paintbrush.
Yes. Yes. Well, and also I would love to have been a part of this conversation because the idea that you're being selfish, first of all, I think selfish is a fallacy. I think we're wired to take care of self, period. I think, in fact, I did a podcast episode called Selfish is the New Black because we care way too much what other people think and end up on our deathbed realizing we did everything for everybody else instead of what really brings us fulfillment. And that's like, whoa, mind blown sort of thing. Like, whoa. But I think what's really important about underlining the anecdote that you just shared is being hyper vigilant about who you allow into your world does not mean that you hate everybody else or everyone else can go to hell.
Or they're beneath you or anything like that. Yeah, I agree.
That's a mentality of lack and scarcity, either or. Acceptance or not. It's like, no. I just choose to focus on the things that make me feel good. And it, again, goes back to your intention versus your reception. Your intention in that moment or deciding who is in your world is not one of malice. It's not one of, I'm going to make everybody else feel like shit because they're not in my inner circle. No, your intention is one of self-preservation, of honoring yourself, of confidence, of self-worth. That's quite noble, in my opinion.
Right. I agree with you completely. And also I want to kind of agree with you on the prior thing that you said with regards to habits, which is kind of cognitive reframing and how it does become habit. And you kind of mentioned how you very deliberately sit in that mindful space. And I don't think you use the term reframe. I think you use the term rewire, but I've gotten to the point where I know that I'm doing this. And, you know, I had a tooth break and I find myself being like, oh, but now I can, you know, get this crown fix that I didn't want to, and it's finally going to match up perfectly. And I'm like, dude, there's almost nothing good about the expense and the pain and the heartache and this. And yet I'm sitting there justifying it as a positive. And it does become this crazy habit where you know, someone in your family will pass away. And instead of being upset, you'll say, well, I'm so lucky that I had them in the first place. And so I think it's this really powerful way to rewire your brain. And it literally becomes this knee-jerk reaction where I immediately go to the positive, to the silver lining.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
I told you besties, right?
Right? Okay. Awesome. Well, what's very interesting about that is I went through that exact scenario in 2007 when my father passed. And I immediately went into what was I meant to learn from this? And my experience with that, dealing with that death, was far different and quite polarized from what my two brothers went through. It's the exact same scenario for all three of us. However, we viewed it in a very different way, which has massive impact and implication on the rest of your life. I like to say when we talk about that kind of proverbial glass is half full, half empty, it is the same glass. It's the same glass. It's just perspective. And a perspective is a 100% choice.
Totally. We've come a nice like full circle here on choice and responsibility. So I want to ask you this, Amy. We love to assign homework on the show, and I know we're almost running out of time. So I want to get this question in, which is, what is a little homework assignment that our listeners can do this week?
Yep. I would go through sort of the process that I was mentioning a little bit earlier. The first item of business would be to look at, are there any things in your life that you chronically complain about that you are not giving voice to? That is your key that you need to start speaking up for this. Otherwise, you are locking yourself into victimhood, and victimhood is powerless. And you're far too smart for that. Anyone listening to this is far too smart for that. So I always say, if it's worth complaining about, then it's worth taking action on. If not, shut the f up. Like, it's just, you're just bitching. That's incredibly unhelpful. So that's where you start. Are you chronically complaining about something you're not taking action on? And then start breaking out, what do I need to start giving voice to? Maybe it's a conversation with a colleague. Maybe it's a conversation with a child or a parent or a spouse. Identify what you want to say to them. So this is the 3-column piece of paper. What do I want to say to them? What do I need to give voice to? And how do I want to deliver it in a way that's graceful and kind, yet assertive, not sugarcoating all of that. Second column, forecast all possible responses. And then third column, all possible retorts that you would want to respond with, so that you leave that interaction feeling proud of yourself. And if you're going into a tough conversation like this or scenario like this, what I always ask myself is, tomorrow morning when I wake up, after all is said and done, how do I want to feel about the woman I was? Not how do I want them to respond. We all want them to respond well. That's what we all want. We're not responsible for that. How do I need to show up in order to be proud of the woman I am? And when that is your barometer of success, you can win every time because it's 100% in your control.
Brilliant. Those are one exercise and a bonus exercise that are really worthwhile for people to play with. So I know we're running out of time here, Amy. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where to check you out, where to follow you, where to learn more about all the different stuff that you're doing, and get in touch. I know at least one very special lady in my life who's going to be reading your book. So that'll be at least one person I know is going to come your way, but I hope many, many thousands more will. So where do we send them?
Everything, kind of like the nucleus of all I do, is over at thejoyjunkie.com, and junkie is Junkie. And from there, you can grab my free ebook. It's also available in audiobook if you prefer to learn in that manner. And then you can find out about a weekly podcast that I do where we talk all about this. And we really look at it through the lens of, obviously, I speak like the everyday average person, right? Like, I'm kind of a sailor. I think that there's kind of this hybrid of personal development and then just keeping it real, like just being a genuine human. So we really try to approach the pod from that perspective. So if you don't mind a few F-bombs and some whiskey references mixed with your personal development, come hang out. Yeah. So everything can be found over at thejoyjunkie.com.
Awesome. And we will put that in the blog post for everyone to go ahead and check out at becomingasuperhuman.com. And the last question I want to ask you, Amy, is if people take away really just one message and they remember it for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
Oh, that your wants, desires, opinions, and stances are just as important as anybody else's. Period. Even if it's the opinion of a mentor that you highly regard or your father who you highly regard, your wants, desires, and opinions are just as important. You just have to believe that. That's the only difference.
Amazing. Yeah. Amy, I really want to thank you. This has been such a blast. This is my last work thing for the week, and it just sent me off into the weekend with great vibes. So I really do appreciate it. And I do hope we keep in touch.
Oh, I so do as well. I'm going to go check out and buy all your courses. And
you're amazing. Thank you.
You might have a stage 5 clinger on your hands.
I love it. Let's make it a mutual stage 5 clinger relationship. I like that.
I love it. I'm all in.
All right, Amy. Thanks again. We'll definitely talk soon.
I hope so. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you for having me.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
All right, super friends, that is all we have for you today, but I hope you guys really enjoyed the show and I hope you learned a ton of actionable information, tips, advice that will help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or drop us a quick little note on the Twitter machine at GoSuperhuman. Also, if you have any ideas for anyone out there who you would love to see on the show, we always love to hear your recommendations. You can submit on our website or you can just drop us an email and let us know. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.